Hi, so today I wanted to make a video on tips to help develop your child's language. This video is to sort of supplement the advice given to you by a speech and language therapist. Obviously, if you're worried about your child's speech and language development, you should make an appointment with a speech and language therapist or pathologist. I'm making this video because I think it can often happen that you go and make an appointment with, say, a physiotherapist and, or a speech and language therapist, and they might give you exercises to do. And when you're in the session talking to the therapist, you understand what to do and how to do it, but then you get home and you found that you've forgotten so much of what they've said. So this video is to reinforce what they've said and to give sort of examples of how to do it, which will help your child's speech and language development. Obviously, you're going to need to make an appointment with a speech and language therapist if you're worried at all about someone's development, because it could be a completely different factor that's impacting their speech or language development, and your SLT will be able to tell you that and provide an individualized assessment and report and ideas for treatment for you and for your child. So this video is solely just to sort of back up what your therapist has said, and as well maybe as tips you can do in the interim, but I do not recommend doing or taking the tips on this video on board without having an appointment with a speech and language therapist or pathologist. So the first tip is to follow your child's lead, and this is really important because, say for example, if you were out for coffee with a friend and you really wanted to talk about your plans for the weekend and they really wanted to talk about house hunting, and they just kept talking about house hunting and wouldn't let you get a word in edgeways about your plans for the weekend, you'd get pretty annoyed and you would stop listening to them. And the same goes for children. So if there's a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and they are really interested in this red shiny car that's outside the window, and you're trying to get them to listen to you talk about, a duck in a book, they're not going to listen to you. So it's not going to help their language at all. So instead, you need to follow what they're interested in and talk about the red car. So the next tip is to talk about, what your child is doing or what you're doing. And this is good because it just provides more exposure to language for your child and gives them a good model of how sentences are structured. So you can say, for example, or you're eating your dinner, or daddy's cooking pasta, or oh, mommy's driving the car. You should try to keep your sentences short but grammatically correct. So obviously if you're talking in a big long sentence like mommy's going to cook the spaghetti and then I'm going to eat the spaghetti for dinner and we're going to have dessert after, that's much too long for a child to understand. So you want to keep your sentences short. So for example, mommy's cooking spaghetti, and you want to keep it grammatically correct because when we talk to children, sometimes we have a tendency to talk in keywords, so that's sort of ungrammatically correct. So we'd say, oh, mummy cooking, whereas a grammatically correct sentence would be mummy is cooking. And you can imagine if you were at a presentation on how children learn language and the presenter said, children learn hearing, parents, language, and they said their whole presentation like that in just those key words, you're not going to really understand what they're saying or remember it. Whereas it would be much clearer if they said, children learn language from listening to their parents talking. You're going to understand what they meant. So we need those sort of non-keywords in the sentence too to have the keywords to make sense. So another tip, if your child is saying something that's a bit incorrect, so if they say, oh, I fall, and you want, obviously the correct way to say would be, oh, I fell. So you can just repeat it back to them correctly. So they say, oh, I fall, and you say, oh, you fell. And you sort of emphasize or put stress on the word that, was incorrect for them and that you're saying correctly. So they can get a correct model without it being, you saying, no, that's not how we say it. We say fell. Just repeat it back to them as it should be. Another tip is to expand on what they're saying. So if they say cat, you could say the cat is sitting. So that's adding one element. So the cat is sitting. If they say the cat is sitting, you could say the cat is sitting on the car. So that's another element in your sentence, and that's how you expand sentences and how children will learn how to expand their sentences too. The next tip is to reduce questions because no one likes being interrogated. And the general rule is that you should have 4 comments to every one question. And so a comment is something like, look at the cat, the girl is playing, the boy is driving. Those kind of things are comments describing what's going on, as opposed to questions of what's that, what's that, what's that, what's that. And if someone was asking us what's that all the time, we would get annoyed very quickly. So it's important to reduce our questions and up our amount of comments. Also, if you find yourself asking too many questions, you can sort of turn that by answering the questions yourself. So if you're saying, what's that, what's that, and you realize that you're asking too many questions, you can say, what's that? It's a cat. You know, or what's he doing? He's driving. You're talking to your child, you should limit distractions such as the TV or the radio, because, you know, if you're talking to anyone and there's a TV or a radio on, you're going to be distracted and you're going to not be giving your full attention to the person you're talking to. Same works for with the child, so you want to turn off the TV, turn off the radio, anything that's quite distracting. Another thing to note is that TV does nothing to help your child's language. Even if it's like an educational TV show, the television doesn't talk back to your child. So sitting them in front of an educational TV show, it's not going to help them develop their language. And another thing is to try and teach your child all types of words, because no one talks in just nouns. And when we talk to children, we tend to just say it in nouns. So, baby, the girl, the man, the car, the pig, the cow, whereas no one talks like that. So we want to do verbs, so action words, and maybe adjectives, so different colours. So, oh, the black cat, or oh, the big car, the cat is walking, the girl is playing. So that's sort of all different types of words so that they can actually make a sentence. So obviously don't introduce all these tips at once, even as much for your child as for yourself, for your own sanity, because it would just be so impossible to keep track of everything you're doing. You can introduce them maybe one at a time, and as the tip starts to become more natural and it's something you don't really have to think about, you can introduce another tip. So you can pick the ones that you really think might work for your child, or that will work for you, that you think you would find easiest to do, and try and implement them. So this probably isn't an exhaustive list of all the tips to develop a language. You know, your therapist might have told you more tips, and obviously I would recommend going with what your therapist has told you, because they have assessed your child, their strengths and needs, and what your child needs to develop their language. But I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.